Two grey-sided robin thrushes, and you can see the one on the left side, it has a numbered aluminium ring on its leg, and it's also got two color bands on the leg, right? So this is a bird that I had banded and then released for a while, and somebody who was a tourist to Eagle has actually took this photograph and sent it to me saying, oh, we saw one of your tagged birds somewhere. Anyway, yeah. So we're going to talk about capturing and tagging birds, and one of the most common ways to do that for passerines is what's called a mist net. So on the left, what you see is a mist net. This is the kind of apparatus that a mist net uses. There are two poles. You can't see the other pole that's hidden behind vegetation. The net is stretched out vertically. Yeah. There are 4 net strings here, and each of these strings sags a little and creates shelves. So you see the slightly darker bits. That's where the net is folded on itself, and it forms a shelf. And they're anchored to the ground using guy ropes. Okay. So the two poles are standing as a combination of the tension of the net as well as the guy ropes that are attaching them to the ground. And every net has a certain mesh size. This one is 16 millimeters. That's a 16 millimeter mesh size. And these nets are almost invisible. I know where my nets are in the habitat, but I have walked into my own nets many times. You just can't see them against a background of vegetation. Birds can't see them. What happens is they fly into these nets and they fall into these shelves and they get trapped. What you have to do is periodically, relatively quickly, check your nets. Make sure that if there is a bird trap, get it out of the net. If there is no bird trap, check the other nets. And this is how you remove a bird from a net. So you walk up to the net, you see that there is a bird. The first thing you have to do is figure out which side the bird came in from. Right? So, because you have to extract it out of the net from the same side that it flew into the net. And that, you can see it's already got a ring, it's called a recapture. So what you do is, you hold the legs first, not this part of the leg. You hold the back part of the leg, which is much stronger, right? And it won't get damaged. So you hold the legs, and then the first thing to do is to free the legs. So the claws usually get stuck in the net. So you can see this guy is now removing the net from the claws or the feet. So this is called the feet first technique, right? You clear the feet first, and then you remove the meshes that are around the wing at the head. Yeah? So he's now clearing the mesh that's around the wing. And then finally, it's like a sock that you pull off your foot, just like that. Finally, the head comes out of the mist net. There you go. And now he's holding it in what's called the ringer's grip. The head is between your 2 fingers, and now he's going to put it in a bag, and you're holding the bird like that. Now he's going to put it in a bag, and that bird is now going to be processed. Processed as it's going to be banded, it's going to be measured and so on. Alright, so in our field site, we have 3 plots of primary forest, 3 plots in log forest, and each of these white dots is a net. So we go out to these nets and we capture birds and we tag them every year. This is just one example of a kind of study design for mist netting. So that was for forest passerines, you use mist nets. For shorebirds, what you use are called clap traps. Those are basically 2 mist nets that are in water about this shallow, very shallow water, maybe half a foot. 2 mist nets that are on a frame, connected to a wire, and that wire is held by a guy standing about 50 meters away. And then there are decoy birds. These are all birds made of mud. There are these decoy shorebirds put in between these 2 nets, so that the shorebirds that are flying up above think it's a nice place to settle, and they settle down. And then you pull that the wire, and the 2 nets close on top of the shorebird. That's called a clap trap. For raptors, you do baited traps. I've never seen this being done, but they do this a lot in the US when they're studying raptors, is to actually have a live bait in a cage that's fluttering about, that can be seen by hawks that are circling. The hawks come after the bait and they're caught in a noose. So once you catch a bird, you can get a lot of information. You get a lot of information that you cannot get from simply observations techniques, right? You can identify individuals by banding them. If you look at a tiger, you can recognize a tiger from its stripe pattern, right? You get multiple captures of tigers in an area. You can say this is this tiger, that is that tiger, because the stripe patterns are unique. It doesn't work for birds. For birds, you need to band them with a numbered aluminium ring so that you're able to tell individual identification. You can get various measures of body condition, body mass relative to the length of the foot. That's a measure of body condition. Fat load. So a lot of migratory species put on a lot of fat. Sometimes some species even double in weight before they finally migrate because they need that fuel. So you can get fat loads. You can get at breeding conditions. So that's a brood patch on that bird there. So if a bird is breeding, especially females, and you blow on the belly, they lose the feathers on their belly to directly transfer heat to the eggs, and so there's no feathers there. So that's a marker that this individual is breeding or incubating eggs. You can also get parasite loads like these feather lice, and you can see whether birds are healthy or not based on all these measures. You can also get a mold stage, which feathers are molting, which are not. Morphometric measures like beak length, wing length, leg, tarsus length, and so on. For some species, you can get age and sex, and like Robin was saying, you can get blood samples to look at disease loads or for genetic studies, malaria loads, genetic studies. And if you tag them with certain tags, you can even get information on movement. Right, so here's a nuthatch being ringed. They're ringed with numbered aluminium rings. The ring sizes are different depending on the size of the bird. So you want the ring to be put on the bird in such a way that it does not completely clamp down on the tarsus. It's mobile on the tarsus. What prevents it from falling off is the foot, and what prevents it from going too far up is the joint of the leg. Yeah? So these birds are then ringed and released, and you can ring using either numbered rings or color bands, and I'll show you one of those. These are all birds that we've ringed in eagle nest, and all these photographs have been taken by tourists who come there. So that's a black-throated parrotbill with a band, that's a green-tailed sunbird, there's a wedge-billed wren babbler and a grey cheek warbler, all with bands. If you look at other kinds of bird tags, apart from rings, there are wing tags for larger birds, that's a black vulture, but you can also put them on things like California condor. Somebody was showing a picture with wing tags, I think this is motioning, for vultures, right? The Nepali vultures had wing tags on them with numbers, 41. You can have neck tags, which are very useful for large waterfowl. So you can see, you can read those numbers through binoculars. A lot of waders now have leg flags with numbers or letters that you can use to. And some people have been using enamel paint to mark birds uniquely or fate. I've never seen this done. All right, apart from body condition, wing length, morphometric measures, what else can you get? Something very important that you can estimate in terms of studying populations is things like survival rates, things like population growth rates, and so on. And you can also get at abundance rates, abundance measures. Like Moshami was saying, there are state variables which tell you the state of the population at a particular time, abundance, and so on. And then there are vital rates which lead to those state variables. Birth, death, immigration, emigration, that ultimately result in a population size, right? All right, so very, very brief introduction to what are called mark-recapture models. They're called mark-recapture models because you capture something, you mark it, release it into the wild, and based on how many of your captures you recapture, you can estimate these parameters. So there are two kinds of mark-recapture models. There are closed models and open models. Closed models are when your population is closed. So your population is not changing. There's no birth, death, or movement. Right? So those studies have to be conducted over a very, very short time period. Because the population size has to remain the same. Over a matter of maybe days or a week is when you can safely assume that the population is closed, both demographically, which means there are no births or deaths, and geographically, which means there's no immigration or emigration. So these are closed population models. They estimate abundance. They estimate population size. In open models, the populations are open. They're both geographically open and they're what's called demographically open. There's the possibility of birth and death, there's the possibility of immigration and immigration, and that's over longer time periods. Typically that's done on over annual time periods. You go 1 year, 2011, go back the next year in the same month and get at these things. And you can estimate survival, recruitment, and population growth rate. And both of these estimate capture probability. What is the probability that if a bird is there in the habitat, it gets caught? Similar to detection probability on your line transits, right? What is the probability that a bird is detected if it is so and so distance from the line? So let's say 50 meters from the line, the probability of detection is 20%. Similarly, you can estimate a capture probability, which is if the bird is in the habitat, what is the probability that it falls into one of your nets, right? All right. Sort of theory behind closed models. Here's a population of birds. Size is n. We don't know that size. The actual size of the population is n. Let's say you mark m birds. Those are the red marked birds, and you put them back in the population, right? So that's what we do with our mesh netting, right? We take these birds, we put a band on them, and put them back in the population. So you mark m birds, then you go back. So that was just the first time period, right? You take out n birds, mark them, put them back in. That's time step 1. Time step 2, you go back, do the same thing. When you sample, let's say you get small n number of birds, of which are recaptures. Yeah? So you've got, I don't know how many other birds here, let's say there's 20 birds, of which 4 are recaptures. That's time step 2, the second sample. And if these birds that you captured earlier and marked, the M birds, go in and mix freely within the population, then the proportion of birds that you marked out of the total population should be equal to the proportion of recaptures in your second sample. And therefore, you can get at the actual N from that equation. Don't worry about the equation itself, but just the general concept. Yeah? Alright, so open models are those used to estimate survival rates. And what you build is what's called a capture history. So let's say this individual bird, the grey-cheeked warbler, was banded with a ring Z57909. So we now know its name and number. And we go and sample its habitat for 3 years. What the 111 means, it was caught in the first year, caught in the second year, and caught in the third year. In the third year, sorry. And Z57921 was not caught in the first year, it was caught in the second year, but not caught in the third year. So 0 means non-capture, 1 means capture. Okay? So you get this for a whole lot of individuals. Yeah? And then there's a, let's say you do that for 3 years, 2011, 2012, 2013, there's a capture probability, right? The bird might be there in the habitat, but at that time in 2011, there's some probability by which you capture that bird. So let's say capture probability is 6.6. That means out of 100, if the total population is 100 birds, you will capture 60. So there's a capture probability, but there's also a survival probability. In the bird, if it has to be capturable over here, it has to survive. Right? A dead bird cannot be captured. So there are 2 probabilities at play here. There's the capture probability, which is at each sampling time point, and then there is the survival probability, which is at each time interval. You put those 2 things together, don't worry about these 2. I'm just going to talk about 57909, where the capture history is 111. What is the probability of that capture history? It was captured on the first occasion, so it was captured with the probability P. It survived from the first to the second occasion and was captured again. So it survived with some probability 5 and was captured again with the probability P. And it survived with the third occasion. So it was captured again with the probability P and survived with the probability 5. And for the non-captures as well, it becomes slightly more complicated, but each of these capture histories has a certain probability. Probability arising from the combination of capture history, capture probability and the survival probability. You put all these different capture histories together, you can estimate for the population as a whole. You can't tell whether a single individual has died or survived, a particular individual. But for the population as a whole, you can estimate survival rates. Let's talk about color bands. One of the ways in which you don't need to go back and capture birds again is if you mark each individual with a unique combination of colors. Like this wren over here is marked with these two colors. Another individual you could mark with blue and green. A third individual you could mark with blue and blue. So when you release them, you can go back to their habitat. If the habitat is open enough for you to sight these birds, you don't need to capture them again to build a capture distribution. This is called mark resight. Finally, I'm going to be talking about tagging birds to understand movement. And this is something you guys would have seen a lot, right? Tracking the migration paths of birds and so on. So there are three broad classes of tags that allow you to look at bird movement. One is called a geolocator. And the geolocators are that small, they're there. There's one geolocator there on the wader. And on the passerine, the geolocator is put onto its back like a backpack. So these are extremely light. The general rule for tagging birds is the tag must be less than 5% of the body weight of the bird. If it's bigger than that, it causes problems for flight and so on. So the body tag has to be less than 5% of the mass of the bird. So what the geolocator does is measure light. Right? At different latitudes, the length of the day is different. Higher latitudes have longer days in summer, shorter days in winter. Yeah? And at every longitude, the times of sunrise and sunset are different. So what this tag does is measure day length and the timings of sunrise and sunset. And based on that, you can estimate the location of the bird in latitude and longitude. And that's how you get these migration paths. So on this day, that bird was there, it then moved down, and so on, right? Using just the duration of day length as well as the timing of sunrise and sunset. So these are called geolocators. You have to capture the bird back to get the data. Right? You have to capture it again and then get the geolocator out and then download the data. There are also GPS tags. These are something that we use in Eagle Nest. You can see that's the tip of a pencil with the eraser. It's a really, really small tag. It weighs about 1 gram. Again, it's put on the back of a bird like a backpack on the legs. And that's how they look in the field. Once we release them, they'll be completely covered by feathers. And that antenna sticks out, communicating with the satellite, collecting GPS data as and when, depending on how you program them. Right? So you can program them to collect every hour, you can program them to collect once a day, and so on. And this is, for example, this is the white-tailed robin, which is that species, and the street-breasted scimitar babbler, which is this one. And we've got some home ranges of these birds. You see, these are all the GPS points for this particular white-tailed robin all over the place. And then you can estimate a sort of 50% or a 90% home range of these birds. And it looks like the white-tailed robin, that's for another white-tailed robin. They seem to have very small home ranges that are also in flatter areas. Whereas the street-breasted scimitar babbler, which are two individuals in yellow, they seem to like slopes more, and their home ranges are much larger. So the white-tailed robins have about a 1 hectare home range, and the street-breasted scimitar babblers have about a 4 hectare home range. Finally, satellite tags. You guys all have heard about the Amur falcon, the one that migrates all the way from Siberia to South Africa, which was getting hunted in Nagaland. And then there was a huge conservation project to prevent that hunting from happening. So these are 3 Amur falcons that were tagged in Doyang Reservoir in Nagaland. And you can see over there that those are solar charging satellite tags. And they're large, they have good battery life, and you can keep recharging them. So you don't need to capture the bird again to get the data about where it is. It directly communicates with the satellite, and you can download that data remotely and look at what the paths were in terms of migration. So that was about geolocators, GPS tags, and satellite tags in certain. I'm going to conclude by saying, look, all these things, point counts, line transects, mist netting, bird tagging, all these are tools, right? And every tool has a specific use, or a set of uses, and every tool also has limitations. And those limitations coming from the assumptions of the sampling technique, right? So it's really the question that you're asking that should determine what tools you use to answer those questions. So for example, your teeth are a tool, but they're meant for chewing food. If you use them badly, the results you get are not going to be good, right? So use the right tool for the right job. pick your method depending on the question that you're asking. All right, thank you.